Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Dare to Age Well Now. My name is Angela Belford. I'm your host, and I'm very excited to be joined today by Evan Pridmore, joining us from right outside of Nashville, Tennessee, in Mount Juliet. Dr. Evan, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me today. I greatly appreciate this opportunity. We are incredibly passionate about holistic health and well-being. We know that there are really two leading systems of the body, the nervous system and the digestive system. Everything else is pretty much downstream. Everything in the body either runs on power and chemistry. So if we can drive the right power supply communication and give the body the right biomechanical or biochemical processes, then the amazing body does a really good job of taking great care of itself and healing and adapting and performing.
Okay, so two systems. Because I'm thinking back to my little 10th grade biology, and my little biology teacher would probably have argued with you that there are more than two systems.
Oh, there are definitely more than two systems.
But I love the idea. I mean, like, we got a lot going on in our brains. And then those of us that are, enjoying our way through menopause also, like, sometimes it's just foggy up in there. So I love that you've distilled it down to really, for when we're talking about aging well, thinking about those two systems, the nervous system, which on this podcast we do talk a lot about the nervous system. We've had a couple episodes on gut health, but specifically, I talk a lot about the amygdala in the nervous system. I think we hear a lot about it, our little fight, flight, or freeze sensor, but it's not the end all. And you kind of catch us up on what that hypothalamus, which those of us that took biology probably remember vaguely, that it was a big part of that system that we don't remember what it does.
For sure. Yeah, it's a part of the primitive brain. It's one of the first parts of you that develops. It's hypothalamus, amygdala, basal ganglia, thalamus. Basically, think of it like Grand Central Station. All data, all sensory inputs, all voluntary and involuntary information that comes in, through neural tissue, passes through there. And then the hypothalamus basically is like your checks and balances system, and it sends it up to the cortex, goes through higher cortical learning centers or cortical processes, and then sends a response or an effect over the body. So the brain really isn't a creator of information, it's a processor. The quality of the information it receives affects its organization and affects the effect that it will derive. So the technical terminology, if you want to get super technical, is called afferentation. So disafferentation, or crappy input, gives you a really bad organization and really crappy output. And if you're, the way that your body's amazingly designed is that your brain's job is to control, coordinate, and adapt to everything that happens around you and in the world and inside you. And if it's not getting the right communication, just like in every great relationship, you gotta be able to communicate effectively, then it's not gonna organize and help your body to heal itself the way that it's supposed to.
I love this because sometimes we get to thinking about, these reactions and these responses, and I kind of joke and say, when Cliff speaks up in the meeting and makes you want to punch him in the throat, no offense to anybody named Cliff, I just am like, that reaction. And I love that you talk about it as like your brain is organizing this information, because I can imagine when my children were younger and they didn't really know how to clean their room, and they didn't know how to keep things organized. And then as we mature and we are able to go, oh, okay, we need a bin for the Legos and we need a bin for this. And even thinking about our brain organizing information, I can notice a pattern with myself where you get to a point where you're like, oh, Cliff's going to do what Cliff's going to do. And I don't have to send the alarm necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, for sure.
So what role does chiropractic play in this space of us having our hypothalamus, I guess, be more organized?
Yeah, process and differentiate better. Yeah, great question. My first specialty is in pediatric neurodevelopment perinatal care. So a developing brain, if you look at the neurodevelopmental pyramid, if you give it a Google, at the very foundation is what's called tactile, mechano, and proprioceptive input. So do babies, come out, grab the car keys, and run down the road. It's like, no, they have to learn how to control different aspects of their body before their brain can continue to grow and develop. It's hitting developmental milestones and going through primitive reflex integration and normal developmental processes that less than 50% of children are hitting nowadays, which is kind of scary and sad.
Wow.
So joint position and movement is what drives the highest quantity, the highest volume of information from your body to your brain. And what's a chiropractor do? Focuses on the structure of the human frame, how joints are positioned in space, and how they move. So if we can restore normal structure to joint position and movement, then we can influence how information travels from the body to the brain, increasing the accuracy and the speed of transmission of information. And this is now very well established in the literature. If you're familiar with Deed Harrison, he is like the leading authority in the world on non-surgical spinal correction. He lives out in Eagle, Idaho. So joint position and movement, again, is what drives the driver of the highest amount of data to the brain. And so if that information is getting distorted, then the hypothalamus is like, I have no idea what you want from me. And I don't know how to organize this or who to send it to and then what the response should be. So did you ever grow up playing the game telephone?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. So if there's like 30 kids in a circle and the first person tells the second person, by the time it gets to the 30th person, it's completely just a jumbled mess of information.
Right.
Well, your spinal column is, 5 lumbar vertebra, 12 thoracic, 7 cervical, plus your cranial structure, your pelvic structure. So if you think of them like different relays along that game of telephone, by the time information travels from your toes up those relays, gets distorted at every segment. By the time it gets to the brain's like, dude, I don't know what you want me to do with this information. I'll make the best of a crappy situation.
It reminds me, 2 different metaphors jump into my brain. One is when you have a garden hose and it's kinked.
Yep.
And you're just barely getting a trickle of water. That is one thing, and I imagined as you were talking about that, clearing that pathway. But the other one, and this one is just a little more nerdy, but we have, especially those of us that are of the age that this podcast is for, remember that like wires getting kinked up, and over time how those wires get broken, and then back when we didn't have wireless and when we had to plug everything in with cords and cables, then when those connections got loose, whether you're plugging into a modem or a telephone cable or whatever, or those wires get broken, then you lose that strong connection, which maybe I just used a weird IT metaphor to get something and made it a lot less clear. That's okay. But I love that. And I've had people that are like, wait, why you don't just go to the chiropractor because your neck hurts or your back hurts? No. And I'm like, no, how can you not see that when you fall or if things aren't in alignment, it just makes sense to me that there's going to be issues along the way.
There's actually a super cool new study published on this last year. So again, Deed Harrison, highly authoritative figure, really, really amazing person. The Journal of Internal Medicine gave him his own issue, and it's the most well-read issue in the history of their publication. So he published a really cool study on asymptomatic collegiate athletes. So college kids, age 18 to 21, no symptoms, no pain, no nothing. And they broke them into 2 groups. Cervical curve, so your neck curvature for 2/3 of the population should be roughly 42 degrees. If the curvature falls below 20 degrees, so they broke them into 2 groups, kids less than 20 degrees, kids greater than 20 degrees. And they measured every single measure of athletic performance, verticals, hand-eye coordination, balance, repositioning, like everything that you could think of. And every single athlete with a cervical curve of less than 20 degrees performed poorer than every single athlete with a curvature of greater than 20 degrees. And the reason why is because of this transmission of information. Angela, are you a musician by chance?
I am not, but I gave birth to a musician.
Oh, love it. Cool.
My oldest daughter, she has 5 different instruments that she has learned.
That's amazing. Yes. She's got a cool brain.
She does have a cool brain, as a matter of fact.
So you understand the concept of tuning a guitar, correct?
Right.
Okay, cool. So if I change how much tension is applied to a string and you pluck it, you're going to change the wave or the frequency at which that string vibrates.
Right.
So if you loosen it up, it's going to vibrate in a higher wave form and the pitch is going to be lower. If you tighten it up, it's going to vibrate faster and the pitch is going to be higher. Your neural tissue works the exact same way. So the neural tissue is anchored inside the bony column. And if the bony column, if your spine gets super distorted or you start to lose these curvatures due to posture and aging, then you have more or less tension applied to neural tissue. And a really cool study published by a Chinese physiologist shows us that the amount of tension equivalent to the weight of a dime can either speed up or inhibit neural impulses by upwards of 60%. So small distortions in skeletal structure dramatically influence how fast and how accurate information travels through your body. And so when that information gets to that hypothalamus and the brain's trying to understand and interact with the environment and then coordinate a response, the hypothalamus is the precursor to your pituitary gland. And your pituitary gland is the gland in your body that releases your gonadotropin releasing hormones, so making your ovaries do what they're supposed to do. Your thyroid stimulating hormone, making your thyroid do what it's supposed to do. Your luteinizing hormone and your follicular stimulating hormone, which are really important hormones that are responsible for the different phases of your menses and ovulation. So if your hypothalamus is jacked, your pituitary can't do its job, and then everything downstream is going to act a little funky too.
Very technical. It's going to act funky. I love this. I'm here for, I am absolutely here for it. Okay, as you did every time, anybody that watches the video versions of these podcasts know that when somebody starts talking about, I try to, like, oh yeah, I got to work on my posture. Um, but there is a kind of a I don't know if it's called a phenomenon or whatever, but I've seen in my chiropractor's office, the cell phone neck.
Yeah.
And we spend so much of our lives hunched over our little laptops, hunched over our cell phones. What's the impact? I mean, is that affecting our curve
Dramatically.
And
Yes,
so
ma'am.
that is what's going to be causing these interruptions. And so it's not enough just to stretch it out.
Yeah.
I'm
It's also
assuming.
not enough. This is kind of weird coming from a chiropractor, but it's also not enough just to get adjusted. The adjustment by itself does not, and this is what's currently published in the most up-to-date research, the adjustment by itself does not reproducibly change spinal structure, which was a really humbling and frustrating thing to
Say that
learn.
again. Does not
The,
produce
the
what?
adjustment by itself does not reproducibly change spinal structure. So this was a really
Wow.
humbling and frustrating thing to learn after being in practice for about 4 to 5 years. And I was pre and post x-raying all my patients over a 6 to 12 month window of time. And the cool part was they were really happy with their outcomes. Like they felt better, their activities of daily living were improving, their goals were being met, they were healing. But the adjustment, because what it does is it resets and it vibrates the receptors around the tissues, the stretch receptors and the mechano and proprioceptors. It floods the brain with really good data and lights the brain up. The prefrontal cortex lights up. It makes the nervous system more efficient. But the adjustment, again, taking pre and post x-rays of all these patients, was not changing their spinal structure. So I asked myself, like, what am I doing for people? I know I'm improving their neurology, but why is their orthopedic health not changing over the long term? And that's where you have to pair the adjustment with something called neuromuscular rehab. So for example, if somebody has a head translation, you want to move them in the mirror image or make the musculature do the opposite of what it's doing right now. But where you see the most amount of correction in orthopedic health is what's called traction, or applying load to the ligaments. Your ligaments are the rubber bands that hold your bones together. You have to physically apply stress or force to them greater than 10 minutes, less than 20 minutes, to get them to start to change how they hold the bony structure together. And so since we've started to change our model of care towards what Deed Harrison is publishing, we are now able to show really amazing corrective outcomes in pre and post x-rays in about a 90-day window of time. I can show you 10, 15, 20-degree improvements in cervical curve in 90 days.
And so, you said you've changed your method of care, so it's not
Yep.
just the adjustment. What have you added?
traction and neuromuscular rehab. And then the fourth component, because some individuals wait a very long time in their life because they base their perception of health on symptoms and pain, which is a really bad way to do it, that they have, 4, 5, 6 decades of scar tissue formation and damage. And then that scar tissue and that degeneration is what's called a limitation of matter. And so, it makes it much more difficult to heal and to change a very rigid and fibrotic structure. So there's some really cool new technology out nowadays. You're probably very familiar with like red light therapies, which help to increase blood flow and oxygenation to tissues. There's a really cool new technology called soft wave therapy or unfocused shockwave. That produces a really cool stem cell response and allows the body to start to rehab and rebuild some of these tissues. So we pair some stem cell based therapy with these different applications of chiropractic care to heal really deteriorated and degenerative tissues and structures, which then ultimately, the reason why that's so cool, and now we move better, we feel better, but now the receptors and the motion is activated and happening, and now the hypothalamus is getting the information it needs, and the brain's doing a better job for you, protecting that longevity and well-being of the cognitive performance of your body.
Okay, so when you say traction, break that down for me. What does that mean?
There's different pieces of equipment, devices that we set people up in. So if you don't have a cervical curve, it's going to be a traction or a pulley forward with the head in an extended position, and then dynamic loads, so weight being applied to that, somewhere between 5 to 15 pounds, and then holding it in place for 15 minutes at a time. You can't do it initially, like for 15 minutes. It's something you have to build tolerance to. But once you do that, you can very reproducibly change spinal structures for the long term. And they've done 3, 5, and 10-year longitudinal follow-up studies with no additional care rendered, and the structure's been able to maintain and hold its correction.
Fascinating. So we get the chiropractic care, and then we do the traction, and then the third step?
Neuromuscular rehab. So actually the order is you want to rehab or move. You want to increase basically the elasticity of the red tissues that are highly vascular, like your muscles, before we adjust you. So that way you're nice and loose and warmed up. And then the adjustment is a heavy neurologic input that helps your nervous system process information better. And then when we put you into a mirror image traction setup, that's what changes the scar tissue formation in the ligaments. And so when we do those three things together and we do them reproducibly over a 90-day window of time, you see really amazing skeletal changes. So people with spondylolisthesis, like fractures in their back, people with degenerative conditions, stenosis, degenerative joint, degenerative disc, radiculopathies, burning, numbness, and tingling, all that stuff, if we catch it early enough, is completely correctable without having drugs or surgeries.
Wow. Okay, I would imagine this has kind of revolutionized your practice.
Yeah, we really have we started this process about 2-3 years ago, but we didn't have the equipment or the space or the capacity to offer this kind of care. So we built a 4,500 square foot facility. We moved here October of last year, and now we are able to offer this care to our community. And we're one of 3 offices in the state of Tennessee that's certified in this type of care. So that way we can help improve upon the aging process, the degenerative conditions, the longevity and the performance of your nervous system. So again, that hypothalamus can do its job as the precursor to the formulation of all your hormones.
So I do want to go back to those of you that have been listening to the podcast for a minute, or that I don't suffer from ADD. I enjoy most minutes of it. And so my sweet brain is, it keeps pinging on the idea of that the study they did with college students with those without symptoms. And so I'm imagining that I'm thinking through a lot of this podcast launched because we did have symptoms, and we were talking through brain fog and sleeping and all of those hormonal issues. But I love that you're thinking about it in terms of truly more wellness, and truly the idea of like I love the difference between neurologic and orthopedic, and that we can take control of this without waiting until we're all the way full on lots of symptoms, been wandering around doctors' offices for years. Like,
Or if you're already there, that there's still hope to reverse and correct.
that's beautiful. I
Yeah.
love that. Go ahead.
There's something you said there that stimulated a thought in my head about aging, brain fog, focus, attention. So, d- you, so your nervous system is surrounded in something called cerebrospinal fluid. Do you know what the purpose or the function of cerebrospinal fluid is?
I would assume to protect my brain from
Yeah, that's number one. That's
my
that's the most common that
skull.
everybody knows, especially
That's
if you have little people in your life, like I'm a father of four, they're little trauma monsters. Why, when they, run their head through drywall, why does their
right,
brain not implode inside their skull? Well, you have
right.
this amazing stuff called cerebrospinal fluid, which is this buoyant viscous fluid, but it also has two other really important functions. Number one, or number two, is it nourishes the neural tissue. And
Okay.
then number three, you know this, but you probably don't know it. The organ in your body that generates and utilizes the most amount of energy throughout the day would be what? Whether you're awake or asleep, it's working for you.
I don't know. I want to say, I'm not thinking brain because I'm like,
Yeah.
it's a trick question. It is
No,
brain. Okay.
it
Because
is.
I was like, is
Yep.
it going to be your digestive? But you said
No.
one organ. So, yeah, brain.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as a byproduct of chemistry, anytime that there's a chemical interaction, there is a waste product, correct?
Right.
So how do we flush crap out of our brain?
I don't know.
The circulation of cerebrospinal fluid. How does cerebrospinal fluid circulate? And this is a new discovery in anatomy about 6 months ago that cerebrospinal fluid does not just circulate around your central nervous system, it circulates all the way through the peripheral nerve tissue as well. Cerebrospinal fluid circulates based upon a mechanical pump mechanism. When you breathe, your diaphragm is supposed to go down, your abdomen is supposed to go out, and your head tilts a little bit and your pelvis tilts a little bit. Your occiput and your sacrum act like mechanical well handles and they help pump fluid. So, in order to pump cerebrospinal fluid to flush crap and waste out of your brain and get it to flush into the lymphatic system, meaning like brain fog and cognitive issues, you have to have good spinal mechanics, and your head has to be positioned over your butt. You have to have the right curvatures in the column to get that cerebrospinal fluid circulating to flush out those byproducts.
Fascinating. I've never thought about that. Well, I thought, funny because my book is called Traveling Light, Free Yourself from the Crap in Your Head,
I
and you've
love it.
taken it to a whole new level because
Yes.
I'm thinking about like the
It's a
emotional
little
baggage that
emotional.
we all
Yep.
carry around, but you're saying like no, like literally the chemical
Little
to
byproducts.
also
Yeah.
be able to flush that,
Yep.
which makes sense from the standpoint of that the importance of sleep is to give our body a break so that it can flush toxins and it
Yep.
can do that, correct?
Yeah, and it's in a non-weight bearing position too, right? So rather than having axial compression and gravity, and we're in a seated position for the majority of our day, we're supine or on our stomach. And so when we breathe and the abdomen's expanding, there are small, minute movements occurring throughout the entire neuromechanical system. And I love that your book is titled or focuses a lot more on the mental emotional side of things. But the brain, the nervous system, the amygdala, the limbic system doesn't really differentiate between portals of stress. Whether it's a physical stressor, a chemical stressor, or a mental emotional stressor, fairly
Stress is
similar
stress.
order of operations, yep, that occur within the body with elevated cortisol levels and dysregulated glycemic indexes and weight gain and hormonal disruptions and all the things that you're probably already very well versed in.
Yeah, and I would say that what I love about, and I just want to give people hope because, as women, for sure, we're like, oh, well, pumpkin, I ain't getting rid of all this stress anytime soon.
Yep.
But the idea that there are ways that we can cope with stress and to be able to really give our body a chance to reset that stress response
For
on a
sure.
pretty consistent basis. I tell people if you, to the degree that you wanted to punch Cliff in the face, you need to gonna have to expend that energy. Either gonna go to a dance party, you're gonna do a screaming fit on the way home, or go for a run, which I'm not apt to do, more likely to go for a bike ride. But yeah, we've got to expend that energy. And then to your point, once we expend that energy, there is leftover byproduct. When our car burns gasoline, there's exhaust. The same sort of thing. Oh, this is so interesting. I love this. I love this conversation. Dr. Evan, where, if people want to see you in this new area and new facility that you have,
Yeah.
where can they find you?
Sure. So we're about 30 minutes east of Nashville. My clinic's called True Roots Health Center. We also do, we're on social media, YouTube. We have a seminar series that we've done this year, a new topic every month. It's called our Be Hard to Kill seminar series. So that's been televised and recorded, and it's out there for the world to see. So our first month was on longevity of the cardiovascular system. The second month was on genetics, epigenetics, and methylation. Third month was on pediatric neurodevelopment. Fourth month was the cycles and seasons of women's health.
Oh,
And now that we're moving into June and Father's Day, we're going to be focused on longevity of men's health as well. So I'm Latin word root for doctor means teacher, educator, and I'm very, very passionate about helping people get the information they need and the resources they need to help themselves get unstuck and leave a different legacy for their family.
I love that. That's beautiful. And we'll put those resources links in our show notes. Thank you for joining us. Thank you all for listening to the podcast, supporting it, giving us your reviews, and subscribing. We are hanging out over on Substack, as you know, daretoagewellnow.substack.com. Would love for you to join the conversation. Until next time, I hope this episode has inspired you to dare to age well now.